We'll call to order the meeting of the Land Conservation Committee this morning. First item on the agenda is roll call.
George Bousset,
Here.
Gary Eder,
Here.
Pat Kinney, Jim Schultz,
Here.
David Mindell,
Here.
Charlie Ortman,
Here.
Jerry Richardson.
Here. Introductions this morning. Are we gonna go around the room, Mary Jo? Or just our special guests?
Sure, let's do introductions. I'm Mary Jo Gingras, Land and Water Conservation Department Director. Want to start?
Seth Hackbarth, Civil Engineer Technician, Ashland County Land and Water.
Matt Boland, Agricultural Technician, Ashland County.
Pat Kinney, County Board.
Scott Pirro, City of Ashland Wastewater.
Brian Ladine, Operations Manager, Ashland Water and Wastewater Utility.
Dan Grady, County Administrator.
Erica Hanikel, Ashland County Grant Writer.
George Bousset, Ashland County Board. Jerry Richardson, landowner, Ashland County.
Charlie Ortman, Land Conservation Committee Citizen Rep.
Jim Schultz, LCC Chair.
Dave Mindel, Ashland County Board.
And Carisha Flint, Administrative Assistant.
Okay, next item, public comments. Anybody online besides Gary Eder? Public comments? Any more public comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion? Charlie?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda, but I was wondering if I could add an amendment in case waste utility people would like to go first. The PFAS land spreading, do we maybe want to move that up? If not, fine.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda, moving item E in discussion items to item A.
This is Pat, I'll second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. That took care of our agenda approval then?
Yes.
Okay. Approval of the minutes.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second by Bousset.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No discussion? Then we will move on to discussion action items. A 2024 annual report.
Mr. Chairman, you just moved E up to number 1. You just moved item E as your first action item.
Okay, we're gonna move on to E, land spreading and PFAS.
Okay. This issue has been raised in Ashland County. We have 2 sites, private landowner sites, that have been spread by municipal sludge from the wastewater treatment facility for a number of decades. One of the sites has had municipal sludge spread for at least 40 years. The other site is also a long-term. I don't know if it's quite that tenured. And then in addition, we have about 50 sites in Ashland County that are permitted through the DNR for private septic spreading. So this would be private septic companies, when they go and pump holding tanks, septic systems, they spread on private lands by permit to get rid of the waste materials. One thing that we're learning about spreading of septage, especially at municipal or industrial levels, is that PFAS are accumulated in the sludge material. So PFAS are a polyfluoroaromatic hydrocarbon that builds up. It comes off of materials in our everyday life. It comes off of clothing. Anything that is a nonstick surface in your kitchen can contain PFAS. There's a number of sources of PFAS chemicals in our environment, and that enters our water through our drains, sinks, toilets, those sorts of things. There is no good treatment for PFAS chemicals, so it ends up in our sludge at our wastewater systems. It also ends up in our water in our septic systems. When we pump these materials and we spread them, we're actually moving that chemical from one site to another. So this goes on all over the country. It is regulated. It's a challenge because there's no way to easily remove these chemicals. But we have some concerns about what is this doing to our land? What is this doing to our waterways? And we do have a case in Ashland County where a landowner applied for a Natural Resource Conservation Service wetland easement and wetland conservation program. The program would have put land into a long-term perpetual protection through conservation easement, and it has been denied because of land spreading that has been going on the site for the 40-year period. There's also concerns about whether the well water, groundwater is contaminated from this. We do know that the soils have been sampled and PFAS is present in the soils. So this has started raising some questions for us on how do we want to handle these types of situations. I did talk to the DNR well contaminant person, our wastewater person at the DNR, and a public health advisor at the DNR. I had a conversation with them on Friday. There are currently no programs available in the state to do widespread PFAS well or soil testing. So there's no easy program for me to apply to if we want to start doing some county-wide testing. There's also not a good strategy right now for any sort of reclamation or remediation. If there is contamination from PFAS on these sites, what do? There's not a program that exists right now that we could actually start implementing. I also contacted all of my colleagues across the state in all 72 counties to find out if any other county has experience with this, because private septage spreading and municipal spreading is going on in every county. It is permitted. It is followed. It does have to follow standards. There are no other counties that are even talking about municipal spreading, private septage spreading, and concerns of it. So we are kind of the first one that's tackling this on a septic level. There are other counties that have contamination from PFAS from fire retardant spraying or other sources of contamination that they're dealing with. Over in Oneida County, the city of Wausau had municipal well contamination for PFAS, but those are from other sources. No one else is looking at septage and how do we answer these questions about septage. So that gives you a little bit of background about how this came to the forefront, and it gives you a little bit of education about the lack of what is available at the state level for testing or for programmatic implementation. Charlie, do you want to take it from there?
I want to thank Brian and Scott for coming in. Appreciate it. That's where we've kind of been riding this road together as it changes drastically from minute to minute. So thanks for coming in. But as Mary Jo said, it's finally highlighting here a problem that's been really bad out east and it's just gonna get everywhere eventually because PFAS is everywhere. And we've all been accumulating it and co-locating it in our sewage treatment plants and then respreading it wherever it needs to go. So this is a first step in that. And of course, personally, of course, my mother would like to be able to have a wetland easement out there. That's kind of in her dream. I did speak to Tammy Baldwin's office, and they're going to be going to the USDA to find out why wetland easements are not, why any easement regarding PFAS at all is going to be denied. I still don't know why, because a wetland isn't feeding anybody. It's you're not shipping anything up, but there may be a good reason, and maybe we'll find out, or maybe they'll change it. Otherwise, lots of people, mostly farmers or landowners, who have been kind enough to help deal with the sewage we all create, are going to be uniquely harmed by being, having no access to federal funds for easements. I don't really have much more to say about that. I really just wanted, my point was to get these fellas here so they could see what we have to do at a county level. And obviously, with my city hat on, at some point, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to deal with the septage or the sewage we create if we can't spread it on fields anymore. So we're all actually victims of a more of like a Mercury type situation, and we're left, how are we going to deal with it? Which you've already started. We need a PFAS profile of not just the county, but the whole state. And at some point, we're going to have to give farmers land to grow food on, because this bioaccumulates in the hay and the cows, anything that eats it, it's going to spread. So those are the long range places we need to get. But in the meantime, this is where we have to start. So that's really all I have to say. Thank you for coming. And I guess we're going to try to, we want to try to add our signature to support of this legislation to immunize the farmers from.
Well, there's a couple other things going on with this too. There is a bill in the legislature right now that you have in your packets. It's the 2025 Senate Bill 127 that addresses this. It addresses PFAS, and basically this bill is for spills that would cause PFAS contamination. So the bill wants to make certain persons exempt from the spills law. And the bill exempts the following persons from all of these provisions under the spills law: if the person grants DNR permission to remediate the land at DNR's expense. And then it lists 5 different persons that would be exempt. And person A is a person that spreads biosolids or wastewater residuals contaminated by PFAS in compliance with any applicable license or permit. That already is happening in the state. The municipalities, the wastewater municipalities that are spreading sludge, they do that by permit. Number 2 says a person that owns land on which biosolids or wastewater residuals contaminated by PFAS were spread in compliance by permit. That also is already happening. So when I talked to the state legislature on Friday, this bill is a little confusing because there already is a bill that requires permitting to make these things exempt from spills. The entities that are already applying materials that contain PFAS are doing so by permit. So this is actually going to be a duplicate bill if it passes to law that already exists and exemptions that exist under the current spills law. Number 3, a fire department, public use airport, or municipality that responded to emergencies that require the use of PFAS or that conducted training for such emergencies in compliance with applicable federal regulations. Number 4, a solid waste disposable facility that accepted PFAS. And number 5, a person that owns, leases, manages, or contracts for property on which the PFAS contamination did not originate unless the person also owns, leases, manages, or contracts for the property on which the PFAS discharge originated. So I put this in here more for information. We're not actually acting on this today. This just came to my awareness late last week, so I'm not very familiar with the bill. I did ask the state legislature about this, just out of curiosity, and I was told that a lot of these exemptions are already in place under DNR permit according to the existing spills law. So I just want to bring this to your attention, but we're not actually acting on this. And then the other thing I was going to mention about what Charlie said, one of the reasons why we're concerned about PFAS is because PFAS is already present in our water. We have PFAS in Lake Superior. We get our drinking water out of Lake Superior. There's no easy treatment for PFAS contamination. Any sort of treatment for PFAS is highly costly, and you treat it by using carbon filters that have to be changed. So then these carbon filters are going to accumulate the PFAS contamination, and then we're going to have to put these filters in a landfill or some other appropriate place. So it's not like we're actually getting rid of the PFAS. Essentially, you'd be moving them from one location to another. So there's no easy treatment. It's costly. But when these PFAS build up in our bodies, they cause all sorts of different health concerns, cancers, high blood pressure. There's a long list of health concerns. And they can bioaccumulate in the environment, which means that they move up in the food chain. So once PFAS is spread, land applied, if it's spread on fields where some source of food is grown, those plant materials can take up the PFAS chemicals. If it's hay, that hay is probably fed to livestock. So then the PFAS build up in the livestock. And if humans consume the livestock, it can be transferred to humans. The health official did say it has a shelf life in the human body of a number of months. So technically we can pass these chemicals, but if we are continuing to consume them, let's say in drinking water, then we're going to have them present in our bodies for long terms of period, and then that's where these health concerns come into play. That's about the extent I know of PFAS at this point.
Question, George?
Right. I had two things to observe on this subject. So when I read that legislation last night, I realized that it absolved certain parties of responsibility without having anybody really pick up the responsibility. So it says if the DNR, these people grant permission to the DNR to remediate, but it doesn't say that the DNR is going to remediate. So that it's not a situation where if they grant permission, if the DNR has agreed to do the remediation, so there's no funding necessarily for the DNR to do a darn thing. And I think there's a complaint to the legislature on that point because they're dodging the bullet. Upholding, you don't have anybody to sue, you know, I mean, okay, the DNR is responsible, but they didn't really say we take responsibility. You can't sue the landowner because they were permitted and they're absolved. That seems really appropriate, but I see a flaw there. And then I had a question for you. Did you know how, if any other countries on the face of the earth are dealing with this question and what they might be doing? Not yet, huh? Okay.
Charlie, do you know? Have you researched that?
George asks the best questions, and that thought never crossed my mind, but I'm writing it down now. I'll do a deep search on it. I would also just like to ask if our guests have any comments they would like to.
I guess I don't have anything prepared. This is Brian Ledeen. I manage the water and wastewater utility. It's something that is new to us as well. We have to deal with. It is very expensive to deal with it. I don't know if anybody has any questions as far as what.
George?
Well, since I was complimented on asking questions. I was wondering what our trend in Ashland County has been, if there's been any reduction in land spreading, an increase of bringing holding tank pumpings to the facility. I mean, I know that my holding tank price for pumping just went up. I'm thinking, well, gas prices are not up. Maybe labor prices are up, but maybe maybe there's less land spreading now and more coming to the facility. What is our status and where have we gone over the last 10 years maybe?
Oh, I can't speak the last 10 years, the last 5 years. I know it's been fairly consistent you do see an increase in hauls to the plant during cold weather, obviously, this time of year. And there's certain ones like Halverson, for instance, they haul exclusively to the plant. They don't have land to spread on. Number 2, septic, they do a lot of land spreading. I'm really not up on exactly how much is land spread versus how much is brought to the plant. I think we took in about 5 million gallons last year of holding. We went through all these numbers, so we did have to adjust our rates. Well, it was around 5 million gallons total of holding, and I think it was around 100,000 gallons or so of septage. We don't see nearly as much septage as we do holding.
And that's from outside private
Correct.
pumpers? Okay.
Follow-up question, please.
George?
So it's just about so when you have to increase your rate, is that because of the volume and it's underpriced to begin with for your cost? Or what drives that?
Well, we hadn't raised our rate in about 8 years, so it was time to update, just to keep up with inflation and to cover our costs, so.
Jerry?
Does the mound system have any protection of it, or has there been any research on that to see if it controls it or if it takes care of it?
That's outside of my wheelhouse, really. I don't know anything about mound systems, how they operate, or if that does any kind of removal. I know if you have a mound system, you still have a tank that has to be pumped every 3 years, I think. And obviously, I would assume that there's more concentration of PFAS in septage versus holding. But how much stays in the tank versus how much is leached into the soil, I really don't know.
Pat?
On the mound system, I asked about that last year. I mean, you got water, and if it's carrying PFAS, it's there. It's doesn't break down or change any faster than otherwise. So you still have that issue. And relative to where a person would have a well, you have a distance you have to have your septic system, the mound system from a well. And it's, PFAS is on the list of why you want those two things separate. With water in the well, by state law, the wells have to be 38 or 39 feet deep for a residence or a dairy farm, that sort of stuff. And if you get down far enough, you're getting groundwater versus surface water. And so you're spreading, this on land, but depending on the land, your well water may well be something very different than what's on that surface. And so where the water runoff is going to vary, but it's probably most of it's not going to actually get into your groundwater. That, in this area, like from the Bidman Swamp that comes this way across bedrock, your groundwater may well be coming, from the Bidman Swamp area, and it's not your surface water. So those can be two different things. But with pharmaceuticals, I think when we, on Clean Sweep, give them meds, I think they burn those at a real high temperature to break those chemicals down. So part of this is just getting people to, turn in excess meds at Clean Sweeps versus flushing them down the toilet, which for many years is what people were told to do. So things like that help. It's something we can do. But what I'm curious about, if you guys are going to start doing some testing, is if you tested the solids before they're spread to get some level, concentration in there, do a big enough sample so you can say, okay, I got this much PFAS per, cubic foot or whatever. We've got this many cubic feet we're spreading, therefore we have an estimate of, this amount of PFAS in general. And then you spread that, but it's exposed to the air. And I'm thinking about Lake Superior. There's stuff in there that we don't use in this country, but it evaporates out of lakes in other parts of the world, precipitates here. Because this lake is colder than most, it accumulates more than evaporates back out. So I'm wondering how much of this PFAS, we have to do some studying, but how much of it is actually evaporating back out as that water moisture, we get some rain and stuff. Is this PFAS getting carried away to a large extent, or is it, actually settling into your soils? We don't know. And then we also don't know where it's moving then through that soil to other areas and who else might be affected. So it would be interesting to do a study. We have a better idea of the level of the problem, given the years and the amount. We don't know what percent is actually ending up there after, say, a year. But if it's not that high a percent, then we should understand where the rest of it's going. And then I guess one final thought is I'm thinking about the sludge is pretty much carbon, isn't it?
Well, it's like there's carbon and it's a lot of biosolids left over after our microfiltration, our extended aeration bacteriological treatment process. So we have a big aeration basin where the sewage comes in, and basically what's going on is bugs, microorganisms are consuming the biomass, and we waste a certain percentage of that every day, and that's thickened, and then we run it through a press, and what we spread in the field is about 20-25% solid. So it's like a consistency of a wet topsoil. And this was the first year that we had tested for PFAS.
But that material would be pretty high percent carbon, I would guess, wouldn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I
So
would think, I don't have an answer exactly what it would be, but
So if it's pretty high percent carbon, I'm thinking about this whole issue of sequestering carbon. Because if you work fields up and expose the carbon to air, oxygen, you get CO2, you lose carbon. And I'm just wondering if part of the long-term solution with PFAS in this is if there's so much carbon there, and I have no idea how much of that PFAS would move into the air if exposed to air, but if we turn those solids more in a confined area, expose it to more oxygen, and then more of it forms CO2, not that we need more CO2 really, but you would reduce the volume, and then maybe we get to a point where we can actually put this into a landfill and seal it versus leaving it in the environment, just to get the volume down if that turned out to be cost effective. But obviously it would take some research and time to figure out if that's.
it certainly would. I do know that drying the sludge further does not remove it.
No.
We had looked into drying our sludge, dehumidifying it, basically reducing the volume. But short of incinerating it, it really doesn't change the amount, to my knowledge. Again, I'm not an expert by any means in this, but so we did look at that as an avenue of approach, but very costly.
So if incineration of pharmaceuticals or something done, I know it's at quite high temperatures, but it almost seems like, I'm thinking long-term with PFAS everywhere, maybe the thing to do is build a plant that can burn it at high temperatures. And then you actually get some energy out of this to help offset the cost of doing this. And if you destroy the PFAS in the process.
Charlie.
I think, first of all, we've got to find a way to get a PFAS profile, and then the studies, which I don't know, that's so much money, but good points.
There is money being put into the next biennium for PFAS research and testing. I don't know what that, well, first of all, it's going to have to pass Joint Finance Committee and see if it stays in the governor's budget. But the person that I did keep in touch with, Mimi Webster, is basically the main contact at the state on this topic. So I'll be keeping in touch with her, and it's possible that if that money does stay in the budget, I don't know if they're going to put it into some sort of grant program or how the money would actually get allocated. But that would be the time then that if we want to try and do some sort of sampling, because our main questions are, is it leaching into our groundwater? We're really fortunate in Ashland County to have clay soils, because those clay soils act as a protective layer, a protective barrier to our groundwater. But we do know that PFAS do leach through the ground. So Jerry, you were asking about a septic system or a mound system. Soils do not filter out the PFAS. So the PFAS chemical eventually can filter through the ground. We don't know if it's making it through our clay. But if you have sandy soils where your septic is and you have PFAS going into your septic system, eventually this is going to leach through the sand layers into groundwater at some point. We do not have any idea how long that would take, at what concentration. But that's how some of the soils and groundwater got contaminated over in Oneida County, where the flame retardants and firefighters were working on experimental sites. And that's how their well water and groundwater got contaminated over there, was through leaching of the soil. So the clay is a benefit to us, but we still have questions about, are our wells contaminated? Do we want to have wells tested in areas where private septage is being spread? It's not cheap. It's about $500 to $600 to test one private well. So if we're talking about doing a profile or doing multiple well tests in an area, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars. And if we want to fund that, that's going to have to be funded through a grant. We cannot expect private landowners to be interested and willing to pay these kind of costs. Our department does offer a well testing program annually. We just wrapped it up for this year. So we offset the cost by 50% for landowners to conduct heavy metal and homeowner well test kits. And it tests for approximately 12 chemicals and parameters, 12 to 14 heavy metals and bacteria, E. coli. There's about 12 different parameters that it tests for. The test usually costs around $120. We make it available to our landowners for $65. So we're trying to get some understanding across the county of what is the quality of our well water. We do not do the PFAS testing because it's so expensive. And we've had one landowner in the last few years specifically pay for his own PFAS test, and he happens to be a doctor in Ashland, so he's highly curious about that. And that well came back with no presence of PFAS. But that's all we know about PFAS really in the county as far as our well goes. Pat asked about the sludge being spread. So the city does test the PFAS levels. It's part of their standard that they have to do before it's applied, land applied. And from what I understand, it passes the state standard, but the EPA just lowered the safe standard on PFAS levels. So I don't know if you want to speak a little bit about that, like the state versus EPA level.
Well, yeah, I guess we are not required right now to test for PFAS in our permit. We might in our next permit. We just did it voluntarily this last time. Our numbers were less than 50 parts per billion, so it wasn't recommended that there was any change into how we spread the amount, meaning that the nutrients in the soil and the sludge were such that what were we spreading, about six tons per acre? Yeah. And brought to my attention this morning, as long as you're not spreading over 10 dry tons per acre, there was no change recommended. And it was just recommendations by the DNR. So I don't know of any actual regulation that we're under right now for PFAS. Again, it's very new to us. We did test our drinking water, I think a couple of years ago, and it was extremely low. It was our raw water, and it was between the LOD and LOQ, between the limit of detection and limit of quantitation. So very, very low amount, barely detectable.
George?
Oh, just green lighting a little bit here, but in thinking about this, it occurs to me that it seems that a logical place for spreading is land that's being put back into forestry. So if you're planting pine that are going to be growing for the next 40 years, maybe that's a logical place. Those kind of sites would be useful.
Charlie?
Would it be possible with our current staff to, even though we don't have the money, but to design a plan that would, if enacted, give us the profile information we needed for the county, and then let us, once we had that, then determine where we could spread, what lands we needed to take out of any kind of food production. Like obviously, where would you want to test for water? Where would you want to test the land that would be the least amount you'd need to get a good enough idea in that area of the county what the issues are? So if we had the plan at least drawn up, then we could approach a grant. Or we could be, we could write to the legislature and say, we got an issue here, we have a plan, we just need some money. But it is hard to go ask for money if you don't have any idea what you want to do with it yet, other than in very general terms. But I also know that creating these plans is no easy task either. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Did you want me to answer that? Ugh, I don't really have an answer. I mean, that would be something we'd have to talk about as a staff. Yeah, but also to hire, we have to find the money to pay the person to write the plan. So it's something that I would have to kind of brainstorm and figure out what would a plan look like. I don't even know what the extent of a profile is. What does that mean to come up with a profile? Right. So, I mean, to answer the question, to come up with a plan is extensive. It takes time, it takes input, it takes energy. Can we do that right now? Probably not going into field season. It's something we'd have to explore. Yeah.
I'm sure as time goes on, there's gonna be more information and maybe you can formulate something or at least get something started, yeah. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Then we will move on to 6A, 2024 Annual Report.
You guys are welcome to stay too if you want to.
Oh, yeah. No problem.
Thank you, board.
Yeah, thank you for your information.
Okay. Annual report. We're going to try and make this as quick and concise as possible. Every year I like to write I don't like to write an annual report. Every year I provide an annual report to the county board and to the Land Conservation Committee just to allow you to see what are we working on, what kind of grants do we receive, what are some of the programs, outreach and education that we provide across the county. So this is not something that's actually required by department heads. It takes quite a bit of work to put this together, but I feel like it's pretty informative. So if you guys have any questions, just feel free to ask. And what we're going to do is divide this up into different sections. I've asked the staff to talk about the section of the plan that applies to their work. So as far as things that might be of major interest to you, we generate quite a few different grants on an annual basis. On page 2, in the highlighted boxes there, it talks about some of the main grants that we get from the state. The numbers that are represented in these colored blocks here on the screen, this is non-competitive funding that we receive through the DETCAP, the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. That's our state program that provides staffing and cost share dollars to us. So we received over $144,000 to support staff. We usually receive $50,000 annually to administer to our landowners for our cost share conservation projects. Seth will be talking about those projects. We had a little bit of carryover from 2023 that we were able to use in 24, and that's what brought it up to 51,689. And then we had an additional $237,000 in grants last year to help us implement other types of conservation programs, education and conservation work on the ground. We had 13 conservation practices installed, and Seth will be discussing that. The next page, the budget summary, that really outlines our individual programs that generate revenue. And I know it's a little bit hard to see on the screen, but I'm just going to run down through the list there. We'll start with the non-competitive funding sources. So I already mentioned DATCAP. That's our State Department of Agriculture, Trade and Consumer Protection. We receive 3 different funding sources through DATCAP. It's our salary and support. That's the 144. Our cost sharing dollars, which was at 51,689. And then we also receive our nutrient management funding. And that's what allows us to write nutrient management plans and provide incentive payment to the landowner. So when a farmer writes a nutrient management plan with us, they're basically identifying the amount of manure that they generate on their operation. They conduct soil testing to see what their current phosphorus and nutrient levels are. And then the plan allocates where the manure should be spread on their fields to not build up too much phosphorus in the soil, and also to help them reduce cost from buying commercial fertilizers. They receive a $40 per acre one-time incentive payment to develop those plans because it takes quite a bit of time. We also have our wildlife damage program that is now administered through the state. We have our annual tree and shrub sale, which Scott talks about every year. That program is not designed to generate revenue. It's designed to be a service to the county, but it does not cost us any money to implement that. We also have some miscellaneous revenue that's generated for our agriculture technician he rents one of our county vehicles. So we charge a rent to ourselves, to our department for that we recoup through a grant that pays for that position. We also allow landowners to donate money to our youth programs on our annual tree and shrub sale purchase every year. So we generate typically around $800, and then that goes back to youth scholarships in our poster and speaking competition. And then we usually generate some money through our no-till planter. Last year we had some costs to update machinery and repairs, so we actually didn't generate revenue there, but typically it's break even or slightly above the expenses. And then we have a list of the competitive grants for last year. Our Act 157 was the last of our 2019 allocation from the state to work on natural flood management projects. We also have received a National Association of Conservation Districts grant for 3 years, and we're going into our 4th year now. That's what funds Matt's position, our agriculture technician. And then we also had 2 DNR grants last year, our Clean Boats, Clean Waters grant and our Lake Monitoring Protection Network. And that funded a lot of the work that our summer intern did last year and Scott Caven's lake research work. So the total amount of revenue generated off grants you see was $472,658. Do we have any questions on funding, grants, budget, any of that? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic to Seth then, and he's going to talk about the conservation projects.
So the last couple of years, I've written a short little one-page article kind of summarizing a bigger project that we've done, and they've all been around this natural flood management projects. So this year wrote a little bit about the project we worked on with Todd Berweger. There was a lot of different practices implemented there to achieve the goal. So although it's under the natural flood management, we did utilize some proven and pretty standard practices, but we did implement a couple new things on that site as well. So we did a wetland restoration with a water control structure. That should be the picture on the right side. And what that does is allow the water to meter out and be controlled rather than all of it going through a grass waterway at once. So kind of slows it down a little bit differently than if you just put a scrape in and let the water overflow and act like a little settling basin. So we did that at the upper end with an access road that flowed into a grassed waterway, and then eventually a rocked line channel as well. And we did a new practice there called a Zuni bowl, and that acts as kind of a head cut control to slow down the water, pond it a little bit before it overflows into the rock line channel. So there's more information on PALs and some other projects we did as well. And there's nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment reduction, how many tons and pounds that we reduced through these projects listed at the bottom of the page there.
I guess a couple key highlights on that project that he worked on. This one project alone for the grass waterway that Seth's talking about, and for the channel bed that was stabilized there, it was 868 linear feet of channel bed that was stabilized, and 10 acres of wetlands that were restored, 51 acres of agricultural land that had been protected from erosion. And the sediment loss that he saved from that site is 193 tons of sediment annually. Annually. Over 400 pounds of nitrogen and 145 pounds of phosphorus. So these are reductions that will no longer be making their way south into the Marengo River. And we can put numeric numbers through modeling on every single project that we work on in the county. But this results in substantial sediment reduction and nutrient reduction entering our waterways, ultimately protecting Lake Superior. The other thing I wanted to mention on this project, this one farm project alone was 100% grant funded of over $86,000. And that was a grant that we brought in from the state that could have gone to any county. It could have gone anywhere. But these are the types of things that the staff is implementing in Ashland County.
And then on the next page, we have our typical DAC cap cost share allocations. So we did a number of projects last year. With Tim Micka, we did some fencing and an access road on a little drainage area. He had cattle kind of disturbing and more or less creating a gully at the edge of his field. So we shored that up and we put in a watering facility for him as well. And that's the concrete pad there that they're just finishing up. We did an access road with Mark Jolma along the Marengo River to reduce erosion. A livestock watering and livestock fencing project with Bruce Kleinstaber. That's one of his new watering facilities there. And underground outlet and subsurface drain, there's water coming off of a farm field that was creating a head cut through more or less a backyard. So although it wasn't on a farm field per se, it was at the edge of the field and put in 2 Hickenbottom structures. So that picture in the upper left, there's a ponding area. So that's filled with gravel about 4 feet down. And as the water comes off the field, it settles in there. The sediment settles out before the water raises up about a foot before it catches the drain and goes in to a stabilized outlet at the edge of the property. We also did a stream crossing for Tom Kriskovich. We had previously done some fencing to keep cattle out of the creek, so he needed a way to cross the creek, and that was part of a carryover from last year. We also did Todd Berweger's project, which the funding amounts are listed there, and I mentioned that project just previously.
Question, Jerry?
It's not a question, just a comment. Those of us that went on the tour, the ones that missed it, it's a lot clearer, but it's so awesome. This turned out so good. I'm really thinking, like, all I can say is attaboy.
Thanks.
Yeah, I do want to point out last year was Seth's first full year working for the department as our engineering technician. Mike Perro had been with us for 23 years. So I want to give Seth kudos, lots of compliments. He did a fantastic job. And I'm grateful to have him on board. Some of these practices were newer things that we've never done before. He learned a lot last year, and he still has a lot to learn because there's 36 different practices he can design. But he's doing a great job.
Question?
George?
Could you just address, Seth, briefly, the distribution of projects across the county from the islands all the way down to Butternut, where they seem mostly focused probably in Marengo Valley, but are there projects planned or thought for in other parts of the county?
Yep. So last fall, I actually did a site visit with Stacy on Madeline Island. There's a landowner concerned about erosion on the lake, but a lot of that is through Army Corps of Engineers, because you can't design a project of that scale through county or state, so it has to go the federal route. But we did give them some suggestions if they want to do some plantings rather than just totally rock riprap their property. So gave them a few options. So all the way from Madeline Island to now this year, we have a couple projects down in Butternut. So there's going to be full county coverage. And as far as I'm concerned, if there's landowners throughout any part of the county, we'll service them as we can with funds.
We take projects by voluntary request. So we do not solicit projects. We respond to landowner concerns. And we're also funded through the Department of Agriculture. So the majority of the projects we design are producer, farmer types of applications. With that said, we can still do shoreline protection, shoreline habitat restoration, stream bank work. We're not restricted to only working on farmlands, but the majority of the types of practice we do is on agricultural lands. But it's all voluntary based. So wherever the landowners come from, it's first come, first serve. And typically we're able to serve everyone that we work with. If we run out of funding or are short on funding, we'll put people on a waiting list. But typically we're able to get to landowners within a year or two, unless it's a very large scale or special type of project.
Pat?
Something that I've noticed, and I've had a number of people ask me to say something about, is if you drive down some of the roads, and for me in particular at Sanborn Avenue headed to the farm, I see a lot of the following. Farm fields worked up to the ditch, into the ditch, and I swear to goodness, sometimes coming up the side of the ditch where the road is. So that creates erosion issues when we have heavy rainfall and snow melt. We talk about bigger culverts with climate change, but it really strikes me that same water runs through our ditches. And our ditches, also need to be improved, all things being equal. And part of that is, whatever the right of way is for the road should be ditch. It should serve its purpose. And it's so ironic that we have ditches that get worked up and we watch erosion go down those, especially me coming and going a lot certain times of the year. It's just ironic that for whatever reason that is going on, and either this department committee has a responsibility to be engaged, and our highway department or the county as a whole. but I've heard about this for a long time, and I guess today's the day I say something about it.
Matt, do you want to talk about what the boundary is for field requirement? How far up to the edge of the field can you farm?
I mean, they can go, technically they can go as far as they want. They're more restricted on tillage practices more in relation to water as opposed to the road. I kind of agree that it doesn't make any sense that they're going so close to the road, especially when you drive by and you look at like the corn as an example. Those outer rows aren't growing very good. Anyway, it's the smallest amount. It's the shortest corn you're gonna see anyway. I don't know why they're planting it. I think most of the time it's the equipment's the size it is and it fits into the pass. It's probably the reason why it's getting planted. It's the buffer is 5 feet. They can plant within 5 feet. Yeah.
Yes. So
Okay.
by law,
They're allowed
it's,
to go pretty
they have
close.
to have a 5-foot wide buffer. So this is why I just want to mention this, is because the farmers that you're talking about are still following the law. And so we are trying to work with farmers voluntarily. So we can make recommendations to these farmers, but we cannot actually enforce them if they are following that 5-foot buffer. So that leads to another question: is that buffer good enough? Right. So that's where there's some challenge, because now you're getting into an enforcement situation, and we can't enforce when they're actually still following the law and they're in compliance.
At those, I'll say too, like at the field days we've done, I've got the photos of the runoff. I've showed them at these meetings before. We have a poster created that shows runoff from spring 2 years ago. And we've pushed the cover crops and whatnot. That having pictures from Ashland County and showing the farmers the runoff, and not having living cover and showing that that's your fertilizer, that's your lime, that's all the manure you applied, that's your topsoil running right off, has spoken volumes to farmers. And so using that at field days and at events one-on-one with farmers has gone kind of a long way. That yes, you can follow the law, but it might make more sense for you to farm more practically, not necessarily following or working even farther back than what the law allows you to do. So it's more of a one-on-one discussion with the farmers. And they've been receptive to it in some regards, but there's still work to be done.
Jerry,
I've noticed, Pat, because of the encouragement of this committee, they are doing things like, when they get done tilling, planting a cornfield, for example, or soybean, they also go and seed the waterway, and they seed it with some fast-growing, vigorous crop that will get a good root establishment in a hurry, like oats or something like to that effect. And it came from this committee, and I've observed them doing it in some of the fields that I've looked at. I'm not saying it's all been done all over, but they are working towards that way, and it's complement to everything that encouraged through here and the farmer cares too.
Pat,
Yeah, I mean, I see this cover cropping, in the fall, and I'm really happy to see that I started using winter rye in '06 with my rather oversized garden stuff. Just amazing the difference it's just unbelievable how much that helps in so many ways. So as I look at the ditches in context, I see, cover cropping. So they're getting most of it. It's just a little bit ironic sometimes when you see that. But I'll just say my neck of the woods, some people that have fewer years farming, I watched some of those practices initially, and then like a year ago, they pulled in the scraper, they had a dozer out there fixing their drainways through the field, but they're learning that if they do the sort of things you're doing and leave these grassways and not working it up, in the long run, not only they're holding their soil and their nutrients, but they're spending less time in their fields trying to farm by taking care of it. And so, that's part of the challenge is you get newer people farming, and it takes a while to figure out, gee, this didn't work so good, but maybe the guy down the road's onto something. So, yeah.
It also takes years to establish trust and working relationships with any of the partners and landowners that we're working with. So you also have to be very savvy on how do you approach landowners? How do you work with landowners to foster that trust building? And what's the best avenue for trying to get landowners to change practices or to move conservation ahead in ways that maybe haven't historically been done? So it's constantly evolving. It's constantly learning how to build relationships. And all of that takes a lot of time too. So the department is moving conservation forward in the county. And maybe it's not happening as quickly as we would like it to, but we're constantly trying to figure out how do we move things forward, become more efficient, protect the land more, improve conservation, and it's still all moving in a positive direction. Were there any other questions related to that? Otherwise, we're going to move on to
Harley.
AIS.
Just a short one. I watch all these videos of how India and Pakistan and a lot of places that have water shortages have adopted an entire watershed approach to when water hits the ground. They send it everywhere in the best places. They have it landscaped so that it waters the field it's on, then moves on to the next one, then moves into a ditch that goes to a holding pond that when that flows up, and then these are 50 square mile, every drop of water is managed. And they work with the next village over and they do the same thing. They've revitalized their land. They've got 3 crops a year. Their springs are flowing again. The rivers are flowing. Their groundwater's rising. Why can't we do that? I mean, if at some point we could just get a big map and look down and even make the plan, say, your field needs to go like this, and then it needs to move down into somebody else's land, and then that. This wheel has been invented, and it is so effective. They're regreening deserts, mountainsides. Thank you.
No, I agree. I was on that tour last fall. That was very informative, showcase how you can leave the land in, or put the land in better shape than the way they found it. My one question is, now that we're past our snow melt and kind of our spring runoff, were you or have you inspected any of these practices here to see how they weathered time?
Yep, so we continue doing, because of the permit, stormwater inspections weekly throughout the year until the site is stabilized. So I actually just got off the phone with the landowner, Todd Berweger, before we came here. And he said it needs some more seed in the waterway, but the grass is taking around the wetland area. So as that pond fills up, it's his job to maintain it and allow the water to either pool as he needs or flow out at a rate that's not too fast for the soil to take. So that's part of the operation maintenance plan, and we will be reseeding the waterway this spring as well.
Okay, Scott is sick today, so I'm going to briefly go over his role. Scott manages our Ashland County Aquatic Invasive Species Strategic Plan. So we do have a county-wide plan. So he works on a number of different programs related to that, including our Clean Boats, Clean Waters program, our invasive species early detection monitoring, which goes out to lakes and water sources to conduct annual inspections. He works with citizens on the Citizen Lake Monitoring Program. He implements different programs at our boat landings, including Drain Campaign and the Landing Blitz. Those are annual programs through the DNR. He also maintains cleaning stations at boat landings and then participates in a student science research symposium. He also manages our annual tree and shrub sale. So last year, we sold about 4,000 trees. We had 175 landowners. This program's been going on for over 25 years. And 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks, we have our distribution for this year. As far as like boat landing work, our Ellie Crocked, she's on staff for a couple years, still full-time. She was our intern last summer. She's moving today, so she's not here. She had over 400 boat inspections last year, and she spoke to over 900 people about aquatic invasive species and the importance of keeping your boat and gear clean so that we're not moving invasive species from the big lake inland. We have very little invasive species in our inland lakes, so this program is essential to keep those lakes clean and protected, because once invasive species enter a water body, there's no complete eradication. It becomes very costly for maintenance. How do you keep these species at a low level and allow your water body to have as few species as possible so it's still a usable and healthy resource? Moving on to the next page, that gives a few facts about our tree and shrub sale. And then at the bottom there is our annual Adopt a Highway trash pickup. So in 2019, we adopted 3.5 mile a section of highway south of our office. And every year right around Earth Day and once in the fall, we pick up trash. So we did that last week. And our staff has affectionately coined that day Getting Trashed, which I think is pretty funny. So moving on to the next page is our annual poster and speaking contest. This is one of the programs that Scott administers. We had substantial posters last year, which made it pretty fun. A couple of our students actually made it to the regional competition, and one of them went on to the state competition. Unfortunately, we didn't have a state winner, but once you get to the state competition, the competition is pretty substantial. Okay, and then I'm going to pass this over to Matt, and he's going to talk about our nutrient management.
Yeah, so, all right. Yeah, so it's been a rule since 2009 that farmers have to have a nutrient management plan. It's been voluntary in the last couple of years. There's still some people out there that remember back in 2009 when the state essentially went around and pretty much forced you to have one. And so building those relationships, kind of like Mary Jo was talking about, is kind of the biggest part in nutrient management. People try to fly under the radar if they can get away without having one. They very much try to, and I've really tried pushing and saying that you can fly under the radar, but you don't want to, because this is a tool that is incredibly beneficial to you. And I think people have really caught on to that, especially a lot of our larger scale farmers have really caught on to why nutrient management plans are important. One of the things, as an example, that a nutrient management plan tells you is it gives you what's called a T value. And that T value is essentially the thickness of a dime turned on its side is 1 T value. Farmers have to be below 5. That's 1 loss of that width per acre per year. And so if you're below, you can lose 5 dime widths of topsoil per acre per year and still be compliant. In a nutrient management plan, we can change tillage practices, cropping rotations, to reduce that soil loss, which will build up soil fertility, and retain those nutrients, retain the topsoil, retain organic matter, build organic matter, and actually build soil health. And then manage properly for the nutrients that we're putting on fields. And a lot of times it helps farmers farm better. And so a lot of the farmers have picked up on that it's a useful tool that's free for them instead of having to pay an agronomist to do it. So with that voluntary signing up for it, we had 11 producers in Ashland County last year, which was a little over 8,300 acres of farm fields covered in nutrient management plans. That's a lot of acreage, which is pretty awesome to have covered by nutrient management plans that are all in compliance with state standards. And quite a few of those had already received the $40 per acre, which means that most of them have already been paid. They weren't doing it for a financial incentive. They were doing it because they see that it's useful, and they want to stay compliant to state standards. That photo that I talked about earlier showing the runoff, that's the photo, that's the poster I was talking about pushing cover cropping. That's part of the poster we use right there. That was a photo that I took using a drone. Seth and I were driving out to a site visit. And you can see right then and there, the top right photo, that's a field that was tilled in the fall. And then during that large spring event, we had a lot of runoff. You can see it looks like chocolate milk coming right through the field. The field directly adjacent to it was a mirror image, was a hay field, which had living roots in it. A lot of root cover, not losing a lot of topsoil, relatively clear water. Right where the two waters met in the ditch, you can see it's night and day of what those waters look like. The water on the right, that really, really murky water, that's all the topsoil, all the fertilizer, all the manure, that's everything the farmer wants to keep in their field to build soil fertility, they're losing. And so when you show them this, that this isn't just some photo from the internet, this is right here in Ashland County, that we can give you best management practices and we can cost share with them, it really strikes a nerve with them, and they actually follow through with a lot of these practices, which is how we got to cover cropping last year, and got a lot of these numbers for nutrient management plans. And then last year, I'll jump onto farmland preservation. Last year was the year to do the compliance checks in farmland preservation. It was all of the agreements, all 4 of the agreements needed to have compliance checks. Every 4 years, they have to have a compliance check where county staff go and actually inspect the farm to make sure that they're up to snuff with state standards. Good news, all of the farmers that were enrolled in it there were suggestions for things that they could do for cost share projects to get into better compliance and to move their farm forward, but they all did meet state standards, which was good. And we had 2,100 acres in farmland preservation, which is excellent. Am I talking about wildlife damage? Okay. And we'll talk about wildlife damage. Last year, there were 7 enrollees, 5 claims came from that. There was $21,533 paid out to farmers for enrolling. There were 28 bears relocated, 43 deer were harvested, and then there was repellent used on 2 different farms. The repellent, I believe, was for elk. And it was a pretty busy year for wildlife damage. There was all sorts of things damaged, from sunflowers, soybeans. There were honey crops damaged. That is across, I believe, oh no, that one is just for Ashland County. But at that time, I was the wildlife damage coordinator. I'm not anymore. And we turned it over to Wildlife Services now. But that was the final season of it, and you can see some photos right there. The top left photo of the 5, that's a circle of bear damage. And what was really handy when I did it was using the drones to inspect that bear damage. The Wildlife Services cannot use the drones. Their permitting and application for their in-house ones to be able to use the drones, they just cannot do it. So they have to walk individual fields or fly in an airplane to inspect them. And so they have a much harder time looking at those fields than we did. And then I used quite a bit of staff effort. Seth helped me, Scott helped me, and we would go out and do appraisals. You can see top right photo, that's me out in the middle of a cornfield doing some corn appraisals. Right there in the middle, that's a classic picture of elk damage to a corn plant. They'd go through and nip off the top of the plant. It would still grow, but it would not produce near the amount of forage or put on a cob at that point. What was really disappointing about the elk damage last year is a single field in one night down in Butternut. An entire field was wiped out in a single night. From the first time of damage. They gave me a call the next day and they said, "Hey, I have some elk damage." I said, "All right, how much do you have?" And he said, "I lost a field." I said, "You lost a field?" He's like, "When did it start?" It was the night before. And I went out there, sure enough, you could see it was clearly in one night of damage, an entire field of of corn was eaten. That was the first time since I'd been doing the program, and I believe since the previous person, that there was a maximum claim, which you guys approved last year. So they definitely do a fair amount of damage. And the next time the Wildlife Services guy is here, you should ask him about some of the stuff they're doing in butternut to alleviate the damage. But that was last year's stuff. And the bottom right, I'll just talk about that as kind of the last thing for the wildlife damage stuff. That's a photo of a single field. All of those pockets are bear damage. That's like a large overview of a field. That's a lot of bear damage. Each one of those is probably either 20 foot by 20 foot or 30 foot by 30 foot. That is a lot of bear damage in a field. I can see in one spot right there in the very back middle, it's probably 60 foot by 60 foot, right where that mouse is right there. They can do a lot in a hurry. And last fall was no shortage of damage by any means. I'll talk, I guess I have one more thing to talk about. The last thing is the no-till. In 2024, we had very few rentals on the no-till. We had the largest list of people signed up for the no-till. And it was looking like we were going to do pretty darn good. I think we had like 18 people, I believe, signed up for it. And the weather just did not cooperate. It was super, super wet in the spring, and that wet spring made an absolute bumper crop on hayfields and pastures. And almost everyone that was signed up was going to reseed hayfields or pastures. And they said, I don't want to touch them because they're doing too good. So almost everyone backed out of those rentals. And we're looking like most of those people that were going to do the work last year are signed up this year to do that work. So I think what we fell short on last year, assuming if we don't have another bumper crop, we should make up for it this year. But we had the 4 rentals, which was 28.4 acres. It was only about $517 in revenue. And we had the $2,400 in repairs. It goes in for yearly repairs in the spring, and we're not going to have those same repair expenses this spring. Anyone have any questions about nutrient management, farmland pres, wildlife damage, no-till? Pat?
I'm going to ask you about the elk damage. That herd is expanding its geographic boundary. I've got a print out there. I can't tell if it's a deer or an elk, but it's over 4 inches wide, which the charts would say that's more than a white-tailed deer, but I've come across them before out there. But there was a 19-pointer out there last fall, so there are some big deer that come through there. But I'm just wondering, if that elk herd keeps expanding, are they going to try to control that geographic boundary? And then, but what about numbers? And I mean, because some of that is a lot of damage. We've talked about corn, talk about getting into round bales, but I got so many, it's out on Maple Ridge Road towards Mason Ag Country, and, there's endless food out there on the White River. And so right now, there's so many tracks all over everything. And then if we add elk to the mix, I mean, even your fields with hay in it, sometimes you get large numbers of deer. Now, if you throw in elk, which are even bigger, we haven't talked about damage to hay fields, which are harder to measure. But are we going to get to a point where some people are like, I can't raise anything because not only do I have deer, but now I got elk?
Yeah, so I'll start with the first thing you said. Are they going to control them geographically? Last I heard, no. They're still trying to grow the herd. They're trying to hit the projected numbers. I don't want to answer for Josh Spiegel. I would ask Josh Spiegel, the elk biologist, about it. But what I understand is they're trying to hit, it's either 1,200 or 1,400 elk in the state of Wisconsin. Their number one spot where they wanted to introduce elk was the Barrens, but they said
Yeah, they're not going to stay there.
yeah, they said they didn't put them there because they were afraid they were going to be too close to ag land and spread to all the agricultural land. So they put them in Clam Lake. They've moved up here. They're going to make it to the Barrens. They're going to spread all that way. One of the field days I did last summer, there were elk tracks and elk damage on a field off of where is it? Do you know where Dave Applegren lives?
Yeah.
Over on like Muckwa Hill Road.
Yeah,
There was corn damage over there.
So
when they spread out in the spring, like a couple months from now, they'll break up from the big herd and they'll spread out for calving season. So they will spread out geographically, but then they'll get more concentrated in the fall. And it seems like where they concentrate is down by the High Bridge Marengo area. It seems like that's not changed. At some point, that herd's gonna reach a size where they're gonna split. And the question is, when they split, where do they go? I don't know. DNR doesn't know. You gotta ask the elk, and they're not fond of talking very much.
They're gonna go with those food.
Yeah, exactly. So as far as the hay, it seems like, yes, they will go out and graze in the hay fields. Mostly alfalfa is where, when I was doing it, where I saw them. The big issue was in the winter. If you have a lot of snow, they're hitting on alfalfa bales and hay bales. If there's alfalfa bales, forget about it. They're getting hit. Making sure that farmers are storing them properly, not leaving them out in the field, is a big one. Farmers, the last year that I did it, that left them in the hayfield, a whole bunch of snow came and they just left them out there, got decimated by the elk. Their round bales just got decimated. So getting them in rows, because then you can actually fence them or do something about them if the elk come in. And then the other thing that I heard too is when I was doing it, we talked about trying to open up a large pot of money from the DNR to create, we called it permanent fencing, but it's like too high and creating large boxes to put round bales in. But I think that idea has kind of gone away. That's something they've done out west for wildlife damage for elk. But I'm not sure what their current plan is because I haven't done it for about a year now.
Any more questions? Then we'll move on. Is that it for the annual reports then? Okay. Resolution supporting continuation of the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Program.
Okay, George, do you want to take this or do you want me to? Okay. The Knowles Nelson Stewardship Program has been going on in the state since the late 80s. And this is a program that makes funding available for preservation of wild or natural lands. And I believe it's due to expire next year. So there are other municipalities and counties that are developing resolutions to try to continue the support of that. And George had asked for this to be added to our agenda. Do you want me to read the resolution or have you guys already read it? Okay, so you know what it's about. And basically, we're wanting Ashland County and Ashland County Board to support this and then send the resolution to the legislature in the governor's office. So we'll just need a motion to approve supporting the resolution and to forward to the county board.
George,
Move to approve.
motion to approve, here a second, Pat?
Well, second, and then I got a comment, if that's okay. You know, it just occurred to me, we're doing the comp plan update. Might we consider a whereas how the goals in this resolution are consistent with our comp plan? Because, you know, it certainly ties in a number of places, you know, like public outdoor recreation, not to mention a few others. I mean, it's not in there right now, but I mean, this whole thing of supporting this ties into a lot of what we value and put into our comp plan in terms of our quality of life and our natural resources.
We could. I don't think Ashland County has ever utilized that grant program. So,
Well, we're hoping.
I mean,
so.
and if you want me to make a change, I can. But I guess I want to be as concise as possible so we can get this onto the county board too.
George, comment?
Offer a friendly amendment to the resolution to add after the second whereas to say, whereas support of Knowles Nelson program is consistent with the Ashland County Comprehensive Plan. Just a simple whereas to that effect as Pat has suggested. I offer that as an
Could you
amendment.
repeat that, please?
Whereas support of the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Program is consistent with the Ashland County Comprehensive Plan. And because it leads on to the next whereas.
Okay, George has amended a motion. Do we need a second again, or does that still stand? Pat seconds it. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. C, open discussion for Land Conservation Committee inputs and comments to be passed on to the County Board's Planning Committee with regard to the upcoming Ashland County Comprehensive Plan update. George?
Okay, so I chair the planning committee, and I see this as a really easy one because Carisha does such a marvelous job of writing the minutes for this committee that our input to the planning committee can simply be what we want to put into our minutes right now. So I think it's a real easy one, and it's something we can add to next time we have another meeting. So I wanted to say about that, that I think this department does a really excellent job in educating the public as to what I would call our land and water and environmental quality situational awareness. It's just kind of a military idea of being aware of, where are your feet, what's around you. When you drive down the road, pay attention to your rearview mirrors, what's coming down the road at you. So I would like to support the idea that in this department, we build on our excellent job of bringing situational awareness to the citizens of the county as to what we're facing in land and water conservation and environmental practices, and objectively, not with an agenda. Sometimes we have a mission for some things, but just objectively, what is our, be situationally aware of what's happening to our environment, what's happening to our land and water in our county. So the PFAS issue just is a really excellent example of building situational awareness for something that really could affect, the broader population of the entire county. That's what I wanted to say about it.
Very good. Any other comments, questions?
So is there a specific ask in there about the minutes?
Yes, there's a specific ask that comments from this committee that people think are significant that ought to be considered in the comprehensive plan. Please make those comments here in this meeting so that it can be captured in the minutes, and that can be passed on to the planning committee without a whole rewriting and documentary effort that is needed, because it's really simple. Put it in our minutes. But
Dan?
you have to say what you want to say.
Oh, I just want to reinforce what George was saying. Every member of this committee is welcome to come to the planning committee and provide whatever input they feel. If they don't want to attend the meeting, they can certainly send a note to George or Carisha for the committee to consider.
Any more? Hearing none. D, International Dark Skies Week proclamation.
Okay, this was a resolution from the town of Morse. This was a resolution that we also passed last year. There is a International Dark Sky Week, which actually ends today. And the last 2 years, advocates from the town of Morse have asked the county to support this International Week. So they sent this proclamation. Once again, do you want me to read this or have you guys already read it? Okay. So then we will approve this proclamation, supporting the International Dark Sky Week, and then we'll forward this on to the Ashland County Board. Yeah, no, this is still for this year in support of it. I was sent this in March and it was right after our last LCC meeting. So I told him that we're not going to be meeting again until April, and he requested that it still be brought before the county board.
Okay, just as a point of order, the county board cannot consider this tomorrow because we're within the 24-hour window. So it will not be till May or June that it goes in front of the board.
In that case, I move to approve.
Charlie moves to approve. Do I hear a second? Jerry seconds it. Discussion, George?
I propose one very simple amendment. It kind of goes with Governor Evers' ability to strike out a letter or a word in a piece of legislation. So in the whereas, about in the third one down that you see, well, now it's to be how many, fifth one down? It's whereas, now I've lost it because, okay, whereas Town of Morris, dark skies, no. Oh, whereas Town of Morris, Starry Skies Advocates supports. I propose an amendment to strike the plural of supports. It should read, Town of Morris, Dark Skies Advocates support international, because the advocates is the collective noun, and it should be in the singular for the verb support. So it should read support, not supports.
Technical error you pointed out, that can just be corrected, right? Okay, thank you. My motion remains the same. Okay.
Motion to change those words in on George's approval. Still have the second?
Yes.
Very good. Motion's been carried. Well, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Now the motion's carried. Okay, F, climate change discussion. Charlie.
Don't watch television. We're doomed. Everything I'm reading and watching says it's happening faster, exponentially faster than anyone thought. Potential sea level rises of 200 feet. So whatever we're gonna do, let's do it right now. I don't know what can we do locally, I guess, is what I would ask. Does anybody know?
George?
So I think this comes back to my idea of our citizenry having situational awareness. Like Mary Jo's done a great job with about the species migration, changing species that will be, adapted to the changing climate here, that type of thing. So on the bright side, I think the situational awareness of people living here is increasing, improving. And on Saturday, it was a terrific program. There was well over 100 people, parading down Main Street and the highway with slogans and signs in support of Earth Day. And just an outstanding program in the auditorium at the Presbyterian Church with speakers about electrification and energy usage. So I think there's situational awareness progress in Ashland County. I'm real pleased about that.
Pat?
Well, Charlie, there are some things going on, and I'll just mention one. We have longer growing seasons, so you look at the USDA growing charts. And so one of the things that we're seeing that when we were kids, I never thought I would see, and that is corn off the fields and cover cropped. The longer growing season allows us to do that now, and we've got more people interested in doing that. And that's a positive because that never used to happen. So not everything with climate change is necessarily negative, although there's plenty of it. The fact that they can cover crop is a positive, and it's happening.
George,
I wanted to ask Dan if you have taken any information about likelihood or not likelihood of climate migration affecting us up here. Because I know the population projections are basically kind of, for the next 10 years are basically flat or down, but I don't know if it takes that into account.
No, I don't think the DOA is taking that into effect. I don't think the DOA is taking climate change into effect when they're projecting population numbers. We see Duluth is certainly getting its fair share of people moving there because of climate. It's only natural to assume that it's going to spread out from there. It's also pretty easy to assume that once broadband is throughout the county, that we will probably be getting more climate refugees because people can work here remotely and they would have a high-speed internet connection. So however we phrase the terminology, as long as we don't use the words climate change, because we know how those groups feel about that, it is something we need to take into consideration within our comp plan and within the yearly plans of land conservation and highway. I mean, we are seeing the need for bigger culverts because of more rain and heavier rain, quicker, faster. We need to look at designing our roads differently because of that. So there's a lot of things we need to do, and but it's all changing so fast too, and money, of course, and all that.
Well, dang, Dan hit the nail on the head. I wrote down 5 things, and 2 of them are bigger road infrastructure systems and climate migrants. So he's right on with that. We need to plan for climate migration. Climate migration is people moving north. There's a fantastic book I'm reading called Nomad Century, and it talks about all of the places in the world that are no longer going to be inhabitable, either for agriculture or humans to live by 2050. 2050. So many nations are going to be moving north into Europe, Asia, and the United States because climate or agriculture in the southern regions are not going to support it. So we need to be talking today, just like he said, about our comp plan. We need to adapt and improve our septics, our water systems, and our transportation. How are we going to handle more people moving here in our infrastructure? I'm talking about our infrastructure. So Jim and I sit on the Town of Marengo's comprehensive plan right now. We've been meeting monthly for months. I keep talking about climate migration. Our plan looks at 20 years. We're planning for 10 years, but this is going to happen in this plan that we're going to see these increases. So how do we plan for it today, what we're going to be responding to in 5, 10, or 20 years? The other things that I wrote down, like what are we currently doing? Our tree and shrub program. We're educating landowners about our tree and shrub species that are likely to change on our landscape. It's very possible we may not have dense balsam forests by 2040 or 2050. That is a species that is going to be highly vulnerable even in a low climate scenario change and a high climate change scenario. We're still going to have balsams here. I mean, they're going to be in low-lying microhabitat areas, but we may not have large, vast forests. So what are the changes that we want to make in our larger forests, on our county forest level? Do we have species that are going to be at risk? Do we want our landowners planting hundreds of species that could be at risk? So we have the opportunity to educate people about tree species that are likely to be at risk. And then we're offering trees that are likely to be highly suitable: black cherry, hickory, black walnut. So we know of species that are going to be more suited to the climate in decades to come, and people have the option to make educated decisions if they wish. So that's one thing we're doing today. Our natural flood management work, everything that Seth talked about. We have areas in the county where hazard bluffs, hazard sites have been mapped on the Brunsweiler and the Marengo rivers, places where culverts have washed out repetitively from storm events. We know where those locations are now. We're getting grants to try and improve the infrastructure, stabilize the banks, work in the uplands with farmers to slow the water down before it even enters these systems. So there are things that we can do. There are things that we are doing. Is it going to make enough of a impact? You know, when we have massive storms and increased storms and we have more people moving to the region? We hope so. I mean, we're trying to make those efforts now. And that's, you know, I would say that's the best we can do, is be conscious, be responsive, be aware, like George is asking us to be, and then take the steps that we have within our control to be able to make positive changes.
Charlie.
I'll rehash a piece of low-hanging fruit that I've been beating up for 10 years, the lawn mowing. I think we need to adjust that I suggested you be forced to mow the perimeter of your property, just so it looks nice, like a picture frame, and then let the grass grow, because there's no cheaper way to store carbon than not mow your grass. And there's a lot of it in town. There's over 1 million acres in the country. Imagine if that was let to grow to about 2 or 3 feet. The roots would be storing carbon in the tops, and you wouldn't be burning gas. So if we could encourage the city and the county to adopt a new grass mowing strategy. I know people just don't like how it looks, but I think when you frame it, it looks pretty good when you mow the edges of it, and you keep the 2 feet around the edge of your property and between your buildings or around your buildings cut to 12 inches or whatever. But to me, that's a piece of low-hanging fruit we should have adopted years ago. Thank you.
Pat?
I think it's been on my to-do list. I haven't gotten to it, but I think we should contact the state and ask them for their methodology on how they came up with county projections going forward. If I remember, Ashland County, they project to decline to about 13,325 people by 2050. What that amounts to is a bit over 2,500 people fewer here in the next 25 years. So about 100 people less per year in Ashland County. And that's all of a couple households a week, or a household a week, that we're losing in Ashland County, if that's 2 per household. Ashland, the city of Ashland, I know, is under 2, I believe, on average per household. So if we lose a household or more per week for the next 25 years, what does Ashland County look like? On the climate migration, I think it's easy for us to come in with a bias and think people are going to move here. There was a study a month or 2 ago, forget if New York Times or the BBC, but looking at climate migration in the United States. And it turns out the 2 best places, Dane County in Wisconsin and a county in Ohio. People want something to do if they move somewhere, because if you can afford to move, you've got money to spend. So restaurants, entertainment, things to do. The state projects the northern half of the state to be in economic decline in the next 25 years. There are some people that go to Duluth because of the climate, but there's also something to do with somewhere to spend the money. I'm not convinced yet that this neck of the woods is going to be the climate refugee. We all know that people retired and moved up to a lake place in the past, and they've done that just because they like being on a lake. They're retired and they have some money, but they're from the Twin Cities or maybe, Milwaukee or Chicago. I don't know that that's really going to change. So if we look at the methodology, try to be more objective. And then I also don't know if that methodology took into account Northland closing. Probably not, given the timing of this. So what impact does Northland have on our quality of life here and our economy, and therefore how attractive are we as a location to relocate to. If we understood what climate refugees are looking for, I think that's important. We could try to do things to make ourselves more attractive, but I'm not convinced we're going to see that much change yet. I think we have a bias on that because we live here and we like it here.
Jim, do you remember the statistics for the increase in our population that Jen mentioned to us? Marengo, the town of
Marengo and White
Marengo
River.
is the largest increasing township in Ashland, and it's increasing greater than the county rate. And the county rate in the last census still had an increase in population. I believe it was less than 5%. I don't remember the statistic.
I'm gonna agree with you on that. Those numbers sound correct, yeah. I
So
remember exactly
overall,
where-
from what we were just told this past month, our population is still increasing. And given all the circumstances that we just previously mentioned with changing climate, remote workers, my professional opinion is that we are still going to have an increase in population here. So that's what we're going to respond to in our departmental level.
George,
I'd like to say that I've requested that this discussion of climate change be on the agenda for each of our meetings. But in consideration of our administrator's comments, I'd be perfectly happy to have it entitled Environmental Impacts of Long-Term Weather Trends. You don't have to use the term climate change.
That works for me.
Okay.
I do think Pat's correct, though. There is a little bit of optimism in projecting climate refugees. That doesn't mean we don't plan for it. That doesn't mean the city doesn't plan for it. One of the big purposes of doing the comp plan afterwards is that we get to redo zoning, countywide zoning, where we could actually really put a lot of the theories and a lot of the ideas into practice. So that'll be a question that Pat and Blake will take up after the comp plan. But zoning is really where we have the opportunity to make a real difference with climate change and if we are going to see an increase in population.
any more comments, questions? Some very good points and counterpoints. We'll move on to G, Ashland County Local Custom Farmer Equipment and Labor Rates.
Move to approve.
Easy
There's a
enough.
motion to approve by Charlie. Do I hear a second?
Pat'll second.
Pat second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 7, are there any more agency, NRCS and staff reports?
No agency reports. I already talked a lot, so I'm not going to read my staff report, but I'll be happy to entertain any questions. And I'll move on to Seth so he can give a couple highlights from his staff report. Actually, I take that back just for 1 second, sorry. I will be heading down to Hayward today. We're in the middle of legislative hearings. The Joint Finance Committee is moving around the state to hear comments on the next biennial budget. So 2 years ago, I did testify in Minocqua on land conservation staff funding. I did send an email to all of you, and I do have a copy of Wisconsin Land and Water's biennial budget priorities. So I did prepare a personal testimony, and I'll be going to Hayward after this. I have a copy of that if anyone wants to read it. But basically, the gist of it is that we get our funding through the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. And in 2006, we had a state allocation of approximately 9.3 million. That met 70% of the county staffing needs at that time. In the 19 years from 2006 to 2025, our base funding relative to county staffing needs has decreased by 26%. And in the last budget, we did have an increase above the base funding, and our increase went to 8.9 million for the last 2 years, which is still below where we were at back in 2006. And for this ask, the Wisconsin Land and Water is requesting 20.2 million annually over the 25 to 27 biennium. So this would be a $11.1 million increase from the funding that we received this year. So land conservation staff all across the state is going to be attending these hearings, and the Joint Finance Committee will be hearing that repetitive ask. So that's all I wanted to say about my report.
George?
I have a question with that regard to Mary Jo's attendance at this meeting on the state budget. I want to figure out whether it's appropriate for her to be able to mention, not speaking for Ashland County Board, but to be able to say that the Ashland County Land and Water Conservation Committee has voted in favor of a resolution in support of Knowles Nelson continuation.
I think it's safe to say Ashland County supports it.
So she would be okay to
Yeah.
mention that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mary Jo before I move on? All right. So talked about the natural flood management projects already. Cost share projects, doing site visits as requested throughout the last couple months, especially last couple weeks. Phone's been ringing and people are thinking about doing projects. I've set up 4 projects so far this year, 1 wetland restoration, 2 fencing projects, and an access road. Depending on where cost estimates and bids come in, we might add another project or 2. Just want to make sure we don't over allocate our funding. The pictures at the bottom there are the wetland restoration site that I was looking at. So it's at the edge of a hayed field with a little gully or head cut forming at the edge of the field. So the reason behind that is just wanting to protect the erosion and water quality that is in the Marengo watershed as well. Been doing a couple trainings and presentations, gave a presentation in Hayward at a conservation professionals network, as well as Northwest area technician meetings. Both of those were on the natural flood management projects, and attended the annual conference in Green Bay. We also have been working on the well testing program, so that's all done. The results have been mailed out and should be in mailboxes pretty soon here. And a follow-up presentation will be scheduled with interested landowners at a later date once the results are in the mail. And if there's any concerns, we'll have that presentation to give some more information. Annual work planning, as well as water quality sampling with all of the rain. USGS is our partner on those projects, so they've been triggering samples remotely, and then I've been picking them up, sending them down to the lab, and getting results from that, as well as Adopt the Highway. Are there any questions?
Great. I am gonna go pretty brief because I talked a fair amount in the update about nutrient management and stuff. You can see I've done 8 updates in 2025, 6 new plans written for 2025 so far, 4 being worked on. I want to highlight one of the new plans that is brand new for 2025. I just completed it last week. I've been working on it with the producer for several months. It is by far and away the largest plan that I've worked on with a farmer. Usually when they get to the scale that this one's at, they usually hire an agronomist to do it because it is incredibly time intensive. Initially, we thought it was going to be 1,200 acres. when we sampled all of the fields, it ended up being 2,300 acres. And so new into 2025, we have a little over 2,300 acres covered by a nutrient management plan. So it's just one new nutrient management plan, but it's 2,300 acres, which is really, really good to have in there. And changed a lot of the practices this farmer was going to be doing. We don't have the exact calculations, but saving a tremendous amount of runoff going into streams, building lots and lots of soil fertility, once again, on 2,300 acres, is a huge, huge deal. So really, really proud and happy that we got that one in there. Yeah, that's a big win it's between Ashland and Bayfield County. So it's a big win for both of us. Sent out a yearly newsletter, which I attached. You can see here, this went to about 325 farmers across the northern 4 counties. Received quite a few different calls in regards to that. And then kind of like I mentioned with the no-till, rental list is created, ready to go, ready for the rentals. It's getting pulled out of storage this week. And then it'll be ready for rental as soon as weather cooperates. On the back side of my staff report, if you can see it, I just included some photos from a training I went to on grazing and no-till. Demonstrated some stuff on bale grazing, which I actually learned quite a bit on that, some different techniques that I think would be pertinent to northern Wisconsin. And then learned some new stuff about no-till that I think would be useful for our rental machine. And then those last couple photos are from a farm down it's the Butternut area. It is technically mostly in Price County. It's right on the Ashland County, Price County border. Price County doesn't really have someone that works on nutrient management plans. And so we're kind of tackling that for them, working with them to make sure that they get in compliance. Did a site visit with Seth and the engineer from Price County, so that we can all make sure that they get back into compliance and get their nutrient management plan updated. That's the staff report. I'm going to say I have one last thing to add. On last Monday, I did turn in my 2 weeks. This is my last week working for Ashland County. Friday is going to be my last day. I accepted a position with the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and am going to be a nutrient management outreach specialist. And I'm going to cover still northern Wisconsin, but in a different role. And so it's been a pleasure working with you guys. And so, like I said, this is my last week and probably my last LCC meeting.
Matt's done an exceptional. Yeah. Matt's done an exceptional job building this program for us. We did not have any person in an ag technician position prior to him joining the department. So he's done an exceptional job building the program. We're in a really good position right now. We do have approval on the grant that funds his position, so we're going to continue. And I'm hoping to post the job today if everyone is in agreement to keep the position going. It is 100% reimbursed through a federal grant that we have. And hopefully we'll still have access to Matt in the future to help with farm field days or other types of educational programs through his new position. But yeah, I just want to say thank you and good luck to you.
Charlie.
We're always trading up the seed heads that blow south and do us proud, but it means we don't get to keep them. So
Northern Wisconsin will be represented.
You surprised the hell out of me. I don't know how to deal with this. I don't want to see you go. Who's going to take that spot? And do you have any idea? Do you have any recommendations?
Matt and I have talked about that. So we're going to open the position, post it for a couple weeks. He has talked to a friend of his. So we're going to allow, hopefully a friend or two to apply. We'll see what happens with the public. We're going to post it just like we did for when we hired him. So we don't know as of today, like who we're going to hire, but we're going to post it far and wide and see what we can do. And these two are actually going to take off because we have a state call that we're supposed to be on right now. So Seth is going to go ahead and take that. So if there was any other questions for either Seth or Matt, if you guys could ask it right away.
All I can say is congratulations, and it's been a pleasure working with you in the short time that I've been involved here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure working with you and a pleasure working with all of you. I hope to still see you around. Come to the field days, and I might be at those field days in my new role.
Okay, there was two other things I was going to mention on my report. We have two new grants that we have applied for this spring. So one of them is a Great Lakes Restoration Initiative grant. That one is going to be implementing additional natural flood management work now in the Brunsweiler. So that one is $289,000, and that's listed on my staff report. And then there's another grant that is going to update 4 culverts in Ashland County that I'll be submitting the federal application in the next day or two. But that one is just shy of $400,000. So those are two other updates that I just remembered. And that's it for staff reports then.
Yeah, sounds like some real good stuff there. So that looks like that's it for the staff reports. Any other reports or updates? A question, George?
Right, I have an observation. So following our last planning committee meeting, I asked Carisha to send me the link for the audio track of the meeting, which I found really, really useful to go back and actually listen to the meeting. Would that be available for this meeting? And could you send it perhaps to the committee members who can ignore it or use it? But it's just a long meeting, but you wouldn't have to listen to the whole track if you wanted to go back and listen to a segment. I just found it really helped reinforce what I had heard in the meeting, and useful to go back and check if I agreed with the meeting minutes. So that was very helpful. Thank you very much.
Dan?
Just as a note to everybody, usually within the same day, every committee meeting is uploaded to a link is uploaded to our website. And so you can go back however meetings you want for whatever committee you want and see the video.
Right, but I just didn't know where to find it.
It's for every committee, but yeah, Carisha can send it to everybody.
Okay, very good. So we're all done with the reports. Any more updates? Then other business? Moving along, we're gonna schedule possibly a next meeting date.
We sure can. Let's see, couple months. You guys want to meet at the end of June or in July? That's going to be field season for us. I don't have a particular preference.
End of June would be good for me.
What's that, George? Okay. How about June 26th? It's a Thursday. Sounds good.
Carisha, can you scroll to May 14th on that calendar? Oh, no, and then go back up one on that if you could. Oh. What? I thought I saw a May 14th meeting that was, when's that farmland or the preservation meeting?
Our next one?
Yeah,
I don't know, because they scheduled it on a day that I can't make, so they just sent out a new date.
because I thought a couple days ago, we originally scheduled this meeting for May 14th,
Mhm.
and then it got moved, but it was still on the calendar for a while. And now I don't see it on the calendar, so I assume it's been the calendar was updated since I looked a few days ago. Okay.
Yeah, we don't have a meeting. May 5th, she's asking. She's asking to meet on May 5th for farmland preservation.
Well, I didn't know she had a date yet.
It just got sent out at 7 a.m. this
Okay.
morning.
Monday, May 5th?
No. Well, that's for the farmland, that's for a different meeting.
Yeah.
Farmland preservation plan.
Is that the one that Pat and I are on with you?
Yes, but I don't even know if the room is available.
Oh,
So-
okay, so that's still up in the air?
And that's only a week away, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't write that down yet. Oh, and she actually
Yeah.
has Tuesday, May
Sure, yeah.
13th in question mark too. So yeah, we'll let you guys know.
Hmm.
We got to make sure the space is available before we can actually set the date in stone.
Okay, so that leaves us Thursday, 9 AM, June 26th for our next meeting. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Charlie moves, second.
Oh, and here comes the rain.
Jerry seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, meeting adjourned.